because what you have to read a lot of times in high school is all these old dead poets, and the language is convoluted. There's lots of interesting phrasing going on, and you tend to read to the end of the line where you need to read the punctuation. So it's kind of like that. I just tested it as a student, and it goes through. What browser were y'all using?
Google Chrome.
I can't say browser. Is browser important? Okay. Because she just tried to do it as a student, and she got in. So I'll ask that. All right, so this last one about, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch, is kind of one of those notions that, hey, let me just flip that switch, let me get inside there, and then everything will make itself clear. So there's another metaphor. And then I like this one, I want them to water ski across the surface. Sometimes you don't have to dig down forever and ever to figure out the meaning. Just kind of look at it and kind of let it impact on you. Waving at the author's name on the shore. That's kind of cool. And here he goes into what the students want to do, particularly AP students. If you've ever had an AP teacher, this kind of seems to be what's going on. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. So we have all these neat images that Collins is giving us about people trying to analyze poetry. She says it's most compatible with Firefox, if you're going to try to get to it, okay? Or would you rather have me have her put it on YouTube? You guys tell me.
YouTube, please.
Okay. Okay. Let me go back over here. And they begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Kind of quirky, but that's how the poem ends. But again, sometimes we overwork what's going on in a poem. We try to work too hard. You look for the littlest piece of meaning. And I promise you, there are English graduates, not just graduates, but professors that teach, upper level, post-master. They beat it to death, trying to figure out what's going on. This one kind of says sometimes we just need to read it and react to it, okay, which is really what more I'm looking for on that poetry project, okay? All right, so that was one I snuck in there. Now remember, on the poetry project, you have to select 4 poems out of the textbook that we have not covered. So this now goes off the list, okay? And they have to be, do y'all remember Lorenzo and, my mind has gone blank. Lorenzo and Crosbyton. Do y'all remember how many lines the poems have to have?
8, right?
8, that's right. Because that's not listed on the assignment anywhere, but you have, she says she's going to work on converting that into YouTube and send the links to me as soon as possible, okay? So I'll get them to you as soon as I get them, unless it's happening in the middle of class. So now let's go look at the first poem. It's called The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner. It's on 669 and 670. And if you happen to look, the poetry section is nice and neat. We start with the lowest pages and go up to the highest pages. I just figured it was easier. They teach it by things they want you to look for. I just teach it this way because it's easier to find. 669, okay. It's like the 100 pages between 669 and it's just like nothing. This is by Randall Jarrell. He's an American author. And it's a short one, and it's only got 5 lines. This is one reason why I teach it, so people aren't tempted to do it. But do you guys know what a ball turret gunner is? Do you have any idea?
It kind of sounds like a cat toy.
So, a cat toy. Interesting. Let's see. Have any of you seen the very first Star Wars movie? Just curious. Okay, somebody's waving their hand at me. Yay, we've got a Star Wars fan. When Luke and Han Solo and the princess are escaping from the big battleship that she was held prisoner on by Darth Vader, Luke gets into the Millennium Falcon, and he goes into this little kind of glass-covered thing, and he's shooting at the bad guys, all right? That's basically a ball turret. So I'm going to show you a picture of a ball turret, okay? Here we go. This is a ball turret. It was a device on bomber planes in World War II. And so they hung on the bottom of the plane, and you would have people sitting in there shooting machine guns. Okay? So it's kind of interesting thought. So look at that, and I'm going to read this to you. From my mother's sleep, I fell into the state, and I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loosed from the dream of life, I woke to black flak and the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. Rather graphic. So, when you're going into battle, this was not the safest place to be. Would you agree with me on that one? I just like it because the images are very graphic, and it's not a love poem. Some of the best poetry was not written about love. It was written about something as almost scary as that. Now, here's an image of one that's been, let me enlarge it a little bit. Here's an image of one after they've come back to Earth. Now, do you think the person inside that would have survived this? It looks like it's had multiple blasts and things hit it, or just bullets. And so we've got this wonderful thing going on. From my mother's sleep, I fell into the state. What does that mean? Any ideas? From my mother's sleep, I fell into the state.
His mom is dreaming of him dying because he's going into war.
That's a possibility. Do you know when they capitalize the word state, do you have any ideas what that's a reference to?
America?
A little more specific than just America. It's part of America. It's part of the American government. It would be the military. Now, I fell into the state. World War II, there's the draft's on. So when, you wake up from your sleep, your mother's sleep, and then the government takes you away, okay? And then he says, I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. If you're sitting in that thing and you're 6 miles, it tells you 6 miles from Earth, above the ground, it's pretty cold. And so, cold enough to fur, those bomber jackets, that kind of thing, had little fur collars, cold enough to freeze that. And it said, loosed from the dream of life. Some nice alliteration, loosed in life in there. Loosed from the dream of life. In other words, if you're loose from the dream of life, you are dead, right? I know I'm belaboring this. We're not water skiing over it, but I want you to see how a short one where we can belabor over it. I woke to black flags and the nightmare fighters. And then that last graphic image, when I die, they wash me out of the turret with a hose. Does this glorify war? Any idea? Does it? Does it make war look pretty?
No, it does not.
And you have to realize, he writes this in 1945, so World War II is still going on. So that would have been almost anti-U.S. propaganda, this poem would. Why would you write this? I mean, it's a glory to go and, win honor and save your country by fighting. And yet the graphicness of this says that there's still young men dying. Interesting take on a poem. Let's go look at the next. I may post just to show you. Let me scroll. I actually went to all this trouble, and then if I don't use it, I'm going to be ticked off at myself. Here we go. The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner. Okay. And then the one right after it is called On My First Son by Ben Jonson, which is on page 679. So when you're analyzing a poem, the first thing you should always do is look at the title. So on my first son. Who is Ben Johnson, who writes this in 1616. So we go from 1945, we're jumping back 330 years. On my first son. What could that title be telling you? You have to think about titles when you're talking about this son.
Talking about his son dying and moving on.
Well, you say on my first son implies that something has happened and that this individual had other sons. But that's a good point. Hey, Connor, you want to read it so that I don't have to?
Sure.
Thank you.
Farewell, thou child of my right hand. Enjoy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. 7 years thou wert lent to me, and I thee pay, exacted by the fate, on the just day. Oh, could I lose all father now, for why will man lament the state he would envy, to have soon 'scaped worlds and flesh's rage, and if no other misery yet age, rest in soft peace, and ask, say, here doth lie Ben Jonson his best piece of poetry, for whose sake henceforth all his vows be such, as what he loves may never like too much.
Okay. The language is a little bit harder to access. But when you see that first word, farewell, thou child of my right hand and joy, that's a good clue if you're telling the child farewell that they've died. And that cherub statue doesn't hurt either. I just want to point out on the left-hand page, if you look over there, this is just to say the poem about the plums. It's got 12 lines. I'm throwing that out there just as a heads up to you. If you want to make a note on your syllabus or somewhere, hey, here's a short poem I might want to do. It gets done a lot because it's short. Farewell, thou child of my right hand and joy. The right hand could be reference to his wife. And I like that second line, my sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. Parents have all these expectations for their children. And, we tend to, particularly the first one, you tend to, they're kind of special. You haven't had any before. So you kind of have all these hopes and expectations. And I kind of like that. My sin was too much hope. This is a father grieving, okay? How old was he when he died, the little boy?
7 years old.
7 years old, okay? But instead of saying he was 7 years old, he goes, 7 years thou wert lent to me. Which is a more, because really, they're only loaned to us, Once you grow up, you're gone, except mine still live in town. And, my son eats lunch at my house every day. Even though I'm not there, he'll eat it, okay? And it says, and I thee pay. I pay, I pay for I love you. Pay is not just money. It's care, concern, hope. And then he says, exacted by the fate on the just day. That brings a very somber tone to it. Kind of says that no matter what happens, everybody's going to die. Kind of comes to that. It goes, oh, could I lose all father now? Oh, if I could lose. One of the main things parents fear is the loss of a child. You expect to be the one who dies before your children die. Okay? He says, for why will men lament the state he should envy? Shouldn't we be envious of somebody who has gone on to heaven? Very religious poem at the same time. And if no other misery yet age, and, as a child, the only thing you have to look forward to is getting old, getting wrinkled. Things happening to you. So maybe it is better to die young, okay? Then he says, rest in soft peace, and ask, say, here doth lie Ben Jonson, his best piece of poetry. So he compares his child to the
poetry.
poem. Yeah. So in essence, he's saying, for anybody who creates, whatever you do, that is your child also. So if you're a teacher, your child is those kids you go out there. You are products, are children in a sense of your instructors, your teachers. That we have become a part of you, you become a part of us. So it's kind of cool. For whose sake henceforth all his vows be such, he says, From now on, my poetry, I will love, but never, I'm not going to invest as much in it. We should invest more in people than we should in things. Sad poem, and it's kind of an interesting one. And then I flip over. I hope you guys had a chance to read Cinderella. It's on page 694. This is by Anne Sexton. I actually have this one here. But when you see Cinderella, what should we think? Or who should you think of? If the title,
The normal story.
yeah, the fairy tale, Cinderella. You know, that they just remade, right? With the blonde-haired girl? Okay. And so Anne Sexton's poem is very long, all right? So if she's writing about a fairy tale, then you have to figure out how does that going to come into the story. But the fairy tale, the basics of the fairy tale, young girl's oppressed by the wicked stepmother and her wicked stepsisters. She has to clean the house. She has to do all the work. She doesn't get to go to the ball, but somehow her fairy godmother comes in and grants her a wish. And so she goes to the ball riding in the carriage made of a pumpkin, and the horses are from rats and all that stuff. And so at midnight, the party's over. You have to run home, and when she does, she leaves the shoe. And then the prince comes and looks for her, and they live happily ever after. Maybe. Okay? So I guess I'll read this one to spare y'all the long read. You always read about it, the plumber with the 12 children who wins the Irish sweepstakes, from toilets to riches, that story. Isn't that Cinderella? You know, you go from rags to riches. That's what it's all about. Or the nursemaid, some luscious sweet from Denmark, who captures the oldest son's heart from diapers to Dior, that story. Or a milkman who serves the wealthy, eggs, cream, butter, yogurt, milk, the white truck like an ambulance, who goes into real estate and makes a pile, from homogenized to martinis at lunch. All of these get rich or these success stories, I guess is what you call it. Okay. Or the charwoman who is on the bus when it cracks up and collects enough from the insurance, from mops to Bonwit teller, that story. And then we go on. Once, the wife of a rich man was on her deathbed, and she said to her daughter Cinderella, "Be devout, be good, then I will smile down from heaven in the seam of a cloud." The man took another wife who had 2 daughters, pretty enough, but with hearts like blackjacks. Cinderella was their maid. She slept on the sooty hearth each night and walked around looking like Al Jolson. There's an illusion for you. Her father brought presents home from town, jewels and gowns for the other women, but the twig of a tree for Cinderella. She planted that twig on her mother's grave. Let me scroll this up a little bit. She planted that twig on her mother's grave, and it grew to a tree where a white dove sat. Whenever she wished for anything, the dove would drop it like an egg upon the ground. The bird is important, my dears, so heed him. This is a wonderful little authorial interjection in the middle of the poem. Next came the ball, as you all know. It was a marriage market. The prince was looking for a wife. All but Cinderella were preparing and gussying up for the event. What a Texas word. Cinderella begged to go too. Her stepmother threw a dish of lentils into the cinders and said, "Pick them up in an hour and you shall go." The white dove fought all its strength. All the warm winds of the fatherland came and picked up the lentils in a jiffy. "No, Cinderella," said the stepmother. "You have no clothes and cannot dance. That's the way with stepmothers." Cinderella went to the tree at the grave and cried forth like a gospel singer, "Mama, Mama, my turtle dove, send me to the prince's ball." The bird dropped down a golden dress and delicate little slippers. Rather a large package for a simple bird, so she went. Which is no surprise. Her stepmother and stepsisters didn't recognize her without her cinder face, and the prince took her hand on the spot and danced with no other the whole day. As nightfall came, she thought she'd better get home. The prince walked her home, and she disappeared into the pigeon house. And although the prince took an axe and broke it open, she was gone, back to her cinders. These events repeated themselves for 3 days. However, on the 3rd day, the prince covered the palace's steps with cobbler's wax, and Cinderella's gold shoes stuck upon it. Slightly different version of the story, isn't it? Now he would find whom the shoe fit and find a strange dancing girl for keeps. He went to their house, and the 2 stepsisters were delighted because they had lovely feet. The eldest went into a room to try the slipper on, but her big toe got in the way, so she simply sliced it off and put on the slipper. The prince rode away with her until the white dove told him to look at the blood pouring forth. That is the way with amputation. They just don't heal up like a vein. The other sister cut off her heel, but the blood told us blood will. The prince was getting tired. He began to feel like a shoe salesman, but he gave it one last try. This time Cinderella fit into the shoe like a love letter into its envelope. At the wedding ceremony, the two sisters came to curry favor, and the white dove pecked their eyes out. 2 hollow spots were left like soup spoons. Cinderella and the prince lived, they say, happily ever after, like 2 dolls in a museum case, never bothered by diapers or dust, never arguing over the timing of an egg, never telling the same story twice, never getting a middle-aged spread, their darling smiles pasted on for eternity, regular Bobbsey twins. That story. Interesting that Sexton wrote some really good ones. I'll just throw that out there. And you have to be careful with some of her stuff. It's a little adult too. But I like the fact that she alludes to, what was that first allusion I picked out? Well, you could look at how she sets us up with those success stories. And then she has those kind of antithesis, from toilets to riches, from diapers to Dior, nice alliteration, from homogenized to martinis, or from mops to Bonwit Teller, just a department store. I'm just trying to look through. We'll start with the last allusion that caught my eye. Bobbsey twins. Have y'all ever, there were children's books at the same time Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys were very popular. There was a series called the Bobbsey twins. It was a family. I had all the books. What can I say? And they had 2 sets of twins, Flopsy and Mopsy, and I can't remember. That was the younger one, Flopsy and, oh gosh, this is crazy. Hold on. I'm going to find it. One way or the other, okay? But that's some allusion to, they always solved the case. Everything always went happy for them. You know, one of those deals. Not like what we have sometimes. Try to get the computer going here. Sorry. Okay. I don't know. I think that's one we can just skim. I can't remember where that other allusion is. I should have marked it in my book when I was doing this. Oh, Al Jolson. That's it. She slept on the sooty hearth each night and walked around looking like Al Jolson. Al Jolson was a Caucasian male singer who blacked his face, which is very offensive these days, okay? If you've ever seen something called The Jazz Singer, here, let me show you this picture. This is kind of scary. This is what he would do. And that's very offensive. But that's because that's the only way he was allowed to sing the Negro songs at the time. So it's kind of, it's an interesting allusion to throw in there. But apparently, Cinderella was much dirtier than she's ever been in a movie, okay? So that was the other one. But there's a certain age that knows that. I mean, I don't. Occasionally you'll see some clips, but not anymore. It's just not because he's so politically incorrect. In one of Bing Crosby's movies, it's called Holiday Inn. It's the one where the song White Christmas first originated. Crosby and the female lead at that time, they black their faces and sing about on Lincoln's birthday, about Abraham. And it gets cut out when they show it on network TV. It's now cut out most of the time. But that's Cinderella. Richard Quarry, one of my favorite poems for some reason. Page 702, 703. Does anybody want to read it besides me? Anybody feeling eager? Do a little poetry interp? Reluctant today? Y'all finally went to 4. Okay. I'll read it, all right? It's written in 1897. We're jumping all around in time. Hold on, let me pull up the document that's got it. Right there. There we go, Richard Cory. By Edward Arlington Robinson. Robinson's very interesting. He created his own little town and wrote poems about all the people in it. And this is one of the people that lived in this imaginary town. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked, but still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat, and cursed the bread, and Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. Okay. It's a bit tart, isn't it? So, there's questions. What happens here? Who's telling the story? Do you have any idea? Wait, let me just assign questions to the school. Smyer, take question 1. Woman Union do 3. Lorenzo do 4. And that leaves Crosbyton, you get 6. We're doing 1, 3, 4, and 6, okay? So, Smyer, I gave you 1, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Wellman Union got 3. Lorenzo got 4. And I should have written this down what I was saying. And that leaves Crosbyton with 6. I'll give you a few minutes to do it. Just reading, glancing over the biography of Edward Arlington Robinson. give you a couple minutes more, and then we're going to share. Okay, Meyer, let's talk about question number 1. Okay, so what happens here and who tells the story? What happens here and who's telling the story?
We said that, like, the townspeople are the we, and they are telling the story. And
Okay.
then we say that what happens is Richard Corey is a rich man who's lonely. And it pretty much talks about how the people see him as one way and they all want to be him. But then he kills himself, probably because he's lonely.
Okay, that's pretty good. Wellman Union, what would happen if instead of One Calm Summer Night, Robinson had written One Dark and Stormy Night?
It would have given the whole idea of the fact that he killed himself a little bit of forewarning, but because they said One Calm Summer Night, we weren't expecting it.
It's a shocker, you know. It does that. And I've taught this poem a lot, and it's you know, and if people have not read it, when they get to that, they go, whoa, whoa. It wakes you up, and you know, kind of interesting. I just thought I'd throw out there for you that the author had a brother named Herman who something similar happened to him. So I was reading the biography going, oh, I didn't know that he had based, Richard Corey was probably, and he said Richard Corey was based on his brother who had lost his business. Okay. Kind of cool. All right, Lorenzo, the story's told in the past tense, and therefore the speaker knows what has happened. Why does he save the worst for last? What do you think?
Because you don't lead with the bad. If you lead with the bad, then there's no excitement to it. There's no feeling in it.
That's pretty good. That's a good point, Alex. Yeah, if you stop and think about it, if you say, oh, I'm going to tell you a story about a guy who killed himself, you know, why do you it? So, Crosbyton, what do you think is the moral of the story? Or the theme?
We said that the moral would be you never actually know what's going on in another's mind by how they look.
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. We judge people, the celebrities out there, Kim Kardashian, all the Kardashians, right? They're so visual, you know, so we don't really know what's going on in their lives. And that's, and in fact, we're envious. And this is a common theme. I'm pointing at the screen over here. Don't ask me why. That's a common theme of how we cannot see what is going on in somebody else's life. Stevie Spender wrote one, Not Waving but Drowning. And I was trying to think, do I have it in? I don't want to read it. I don't want to give it away to you if we're going to read it. But it's similarly based, okay? Basically, somebody says, let me pull it up real quick. But that is the point. You got it. And so there's a very rhythmic, very sing-songy version. You know, you could do Richard Corey, my bad, jeez. You could do it. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. There's this very sing-songy version to that. So that when you finally get down to that part, that you would do the singy song, almost childlike kind of rhythm to it, and then put those last two graphic lines, shocker ending. It almost feels like some kind of interesting twist. I'm trying to get to Google here, okay? And I will find Not Waving But Drowning and read it to you real quick. There we go. Not Waving But Drowning. Oh, there's a band called Not Waving But Drowning. That's interesting. Okay. Here it is, and we can hear her read it? Or somebody's reading it. That's cool. Let's let her read it. Let me make sure my volume's up. I'm on poetryfoundation.org. It's a great place to look for poems, okay? Let's see here. Let's see if it'll read it to us.
Not Waving, But Drowning by Stevie Smith. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him, his heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, 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 it was too cold always. Still, the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning.
Same point, don't you think, on that poem? Kind of cool. All right, so now we've got, let me check the timelines here real quick. 8:46. We'll stop there for today. So we will be covering the chimney sweeper, two chimney sweepers. They are both by the same poet. Actually, we can go ahead and I can intro him real quick. William Blake is a very fascinating poet. He is the first. He writes around 1800. Okay, he's the first person to write his poetry, illustrate his poetry, and color it and print it. He did it all. And that's one of the neat things about Blake, is that he did all that work. Wrong thing I'm in. That he would write these poems and then he illustrated them, so you know that the illustrations fit what's being said. That makes it, that makes it even more fitting, because you know it's appropriate. It's not like, a lot of times you get a textbook and they stick pictures in there that's like the mouse on the Introduction to Poetry poem, okay? I've got quite a few. Here we go. Open up. Come on, folder, open up. He wrote books called Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. So they are opposites, okay? And this is the front piece that he did of let's do Innocence first. This is the front piece when you look in. You've got what looks to be like a Pied Piper and a cherub. See if I can make that a little bit easier to see. And there's this little baby image, kind of very Greek-like. You've got trees, you've got sheep. So then you start thinking about what all that might symbolize. Okay. We've got, let's see, what's the next one I have up here? Here's a copy of one of my more favorite poems of his, called A Poison Tree. So whenever you see a single tree, what are you supposed to think about? What allusion is the single tree going to be to? Now remember, when you have a single tree in symbolism, you've always got to think about the tree that represents the knowledge of, the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. And so that's what Blake does. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. We've got at least 3 poems that we're going to do from Blake on Monday. Okay? You'll have a good weekend. It says connect assignment. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I will nothing to do on Friday.
Miss Thompson,
Yes.
do we have a connect due this week?
I just said, don't worry about it. We're not going to do it, okay?
Sorry, never mind.
Okay. I will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend. Wonderful, Patty. Let me go get my email. I've got to log in first. Go to it this way.